3, 2, 1.
Earlier this week, Ivanka Trump told Fox and Friends that she tries to stay out of politics. So she's trying to convince you that she looks at politics the same way she stays out of the working conditions at the Chinese factory that makes her shoes. Trump Report starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, that's right. We're here to take a permanent vacation. And, you know, if you don't have your green cards in order, you might leave the country and be taking a permanent vacation and not back in, thanks to the somewhat partial allowance, I guess is a good word, of the travel ban, which we'll get to in a moment. But what are we getting to? Why, we're getting to the Trump Report. Hi there. I'm Christian Bladt, at ChristianDMZ. We've got a full panel for those of you watching on YouTube. You can already tell that. To my immediate left, camera right, Brooke Soliz, back again at Brooke Soliz TV. And
we were supposed to enter applause there.
No, I expected her to say something.
I didn't know you wanted. Usually, you just introduce us and then go down the line, but you're allowing us to talk.
I thought that you wanted to tell us what you had for dinner because you were so proud of yourself.
Oh no, I'm not going to reveal.
Oh no, okay. She ate very sensibly. Someone who also ate sensibly, Chelsea Galicia. At Chelsea Galicia. I had popcorn for dinner, for everyone wondering. At Chelsea Galicia, and at the other end of the desk, Scott Moore at SMan80.
Hi.
Welcome, and don't forget the show is at Trump Report ABTV. You know, sometimes I just go to the song that seems like it has a very tenuous connection to what we're going to talk about, and we will talk about the somewhat, I think allowance, the word I used earlier, is probably the way to refer to, you know, the Supreme Court is going to basically look the other way on the travel ban for a little while. But I guess the first thing to talk about today, the Senate Republican leaders, they had to do a little bit of an about-face on the health care bill that they were so excited that they were going to just ram through without anybody ever seeing anything about it, meeting in secret. Well, slow your roll. You're going to have to wait till after the July 4th recess, which, I don't know, Scott, the way that I understand Congress works, you take a break for July 4th, you come back, what, October 15th?
Right, exactly.
That's about the way it works. So it's going to be a little while. But so clearly they didn't have the votes that they thought they did, and what it really comes down to is none of the Democrats are going to vote for it, and they actually, unless I'm mistaken, they can't lose even two or more than two.
More than
Yeah,
two.
so they can lose two, and you already know Rand Paul's not voting for it. So, you know, you got to get everybody else in line, and I guess that they're not convinced that everybody wants this, and I guess people like your Rand Pauls are like, well, no, it doesn't do enough, so I'm not going to vote for it because it's not crazy enough. It's out there, but it's not his dad. It's not Ron Paul crazy.
We need batshit level.
Yeah, that's exactly. When if you can put something on Rand Paul's desk that's batshit, then maybe he might sign it. So Scott, we'll start with you because that's not very chivalrous to skip over both the ladies, and that's the kind of show we run here. Hey, that's America in 2017. How are you surprised to hear this? Because we were told, like, we're voting, we've got the votes, it's happening.
No, not surprised at all, because you have two sides there with the Republicans. You have one side where it felt like it wasn't extreme enough, and then you have the other side of the senators that are feeling a little concerned that when they're going up for election next year in their states, the ones that had Medicaid expansions like the Rob Portmans of the world in Ohio and the Susan Collins in Maine and Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, when you have some of those people that have to deal with their constituents that are saying, whoa, don't cut our Medicaid coverage and everything. So those senators in particular are very worried about voting on this bill. So you have two sides that are going to be hard to come together at, you know, to kind of meet in the middle. From the one side of the Republican wing that's like, it's not extreme enough, and the other ones that are like, it's too far.
So this is a moment we should be glad there aren't term limits, where everybody's just really focused on getting reelected and keeping their jobs, because if they did believe in this, they'd be like, well, it's not like I can run again, so why not? Right. So everybody's a little bit concerned about that. Chelsea, in addition to this, the Congressional Budget Office kind of messed everything up for the Republicans by saying, oh no, this is terrible, and 22 million people will lose their health care if the Senate version of health care reform, the way it is at least now, aka the repeal of Obamacare, if it passes. So what do you think about the Congressional Budget Office? You know, how dare they mention how terrible something is?
I think they told us what we already knew was coming. I think we've gone...
do you think Mitch McConnell knew that was coming?
Oh, What I would do
That's how
to
I
be
feel, too.
able to get into the mind of that man.
Right, same.
I either
Why would you
assume
want to?
correctly
Ugh.
that he's just completely and totally morally bankrupt and bought off. I don't want to look at a fellow human being like that, so I would like to dive into the brain and see what got crossed.
And
in that
was there
wiring.
anything good still there that actually cares about his constituents, or is it all about, because we've seen the way he's behaved over the
See, for
past
me,
couple of
I
years.
would assume that every thought in Mitch McConnell's head, it kind of alternates between Marlboro Red, Marlboro Unfiltered, Marlboro Light. It's just some variation of that. Like, he just doesn't really know which one he wants, and then all the politics happen kind of around him. But I guess you're giving him a little bit more credit than I
Oh,
did.
yeah. I was going to say, he's very...
He's evil,
He
but
is
he's
very
not.
sneaky,
He's not
though.
incompetent. He's not.
No, that's why he's gotten
not-
things done, because he's so
not
smart.
Paul Ryan. So
No.
he has been very smart about this, and I think he knows that's why he's delaying. That we need to give these guys time to mull it over, let Trump Twitter bully them a little bit, make them scared. But one thing that's good that has come out of this is that our democracy is working, because I do think that people have called their senators. I do think the
absolutely.
constituents are voicing their concern over this bill, and those that care about being reelected are digging their heels in a little
I
bit,
was really
which is good.
surprised that some of the Republican senators said, I need to go back home and hold a town hall and see what my constituents
I
think.
know.
I was like, well,
So reasonable of these Republicans.
Right.
because
Like-
for a while they were dodging them, and then what was happening is we would have like Representative Sean Scott Maloney who would adopt a district,
Right.
go into a district whose Republican representative refused to hold a town hall and hold it for them. And I think the Republicans are like, oh, we can't let that go down. So they're gonna now
So
have
maybe they're
town
getting
halls.
a little less scared of Trump, which is good. But I don't think any of them wants to be called out on Twitter.
No, and that's the thing. If, say, only 3 Republican senators vote against it, then you know that you're going to be mentioned pretty much constantly, and somebody like Rand Paul, who I mentioned, he'll take that as a badge of honor, that it's like, well, of course I didn't vote for it. I don't believe in it. I also think that just any kind of, I think an outright repeal of Obamacare in terms of no health care for anyone ever, mandated by the government, including Medicare. That might be what Rand Paul wants. I'm not sure, but I know he wants the government to stay out of it. So this is just sort of moving some game pieces around on the board, and he's just like, no, I'm not interested. But I think a lot of the other senators are not going to appreciate, just think of how often Donald Trump will tweet out, well, loser Ted Cruz, that's not anything new. Lion Ted.
Lion Ted.
He'll be Lion
Lion
Ted.
Ted.
But, you mentioned Ron Johnson, I think, and that's not somebody that's really been on the receiving end of constant 3 a.m. Trump tweets. I don't think he wants that. We used to have him on the radio show that I worked on, and he didn't seem like the kind of guy that's really built for, a barrage of anger at him.
But at the same time, he's from Wisconsin,
Yeah.
which is a purple state and is going to have a very interesting election coming up in 2018. And so I think it's showing the Republicans that it's not that easy to repeal Obamacare as much as they thought they could. And the other issue is they never came up with a decent plan after all those years. They sat back, and now they're trying to rush something through, which was ridiculous to do that anyways. But the problem is when that CBO came out, it really spelled defeat for it at this time, because it's not popular. It's not going to be supported by the majority of people, including their own constituents. So
What have they been doing the last 7 years when they've been so pissed that this was the law of the
Well,
land?
and we've talked about
Yeah,
this on
yeah.
the show, is that they would hold those votes to repeal
It's
it or overhaul
symbolic.
it, but they didn't need to actually have any
exactly.
plan.
Type of plan.
And they
So there
really
was,
didn't
like-
think they were going to win in 2016 with the president, so they thought, okay, they're not going to really have to work to come up with anything decent.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
It sounds reasonable.
They were tweeting about the birther movement. That's what they were doing.
Well, now they're at least behind closed doors. They were really trying to get it done, and that was the thing I didn't understand. Is like, what's the rush? And I guess the rush is try and get the vote before things like the CBO come about. The more people read it, the more they're going to realize what the problems are.
Which is so devious. Again, why would you want to do that and try to rush something through? That's so horrible. I mean, I get just the bottom line being able to say, look, we did it. We go back to their hardcore base and say we repealed and replaced it. But why would you want to do something when it's going to eventually get out anyways and be terrible? I guess they just assume they're just going to win because everyone's going to vote them in again. And
I think that they can spin it. They've gotten really good at, this is not a tax cut for the wealthy. This is giving job creators a boost, you know, and
this
expect
is giving
people to believe
citizens
that.
a choice, right? Whether or not they want to pay.
The freedom, the independence
but there's
to
really no
choose.
choice, because when you can't afford it, then you're stuck with nothing. And if they would look far ahead enough to know that those people who are stuck with nothing end up going to these county hospitals, emergency rooms, and taxpayers end up paying anyway.
Right.
It's a horrible cycle, and
all they're doing is
they'd
just
wake
moving
up.
money around from Obamacare and putting it in other places, you know, and unfortunately it's hurting.
We know whose pockets it's
exactly, and it's hurting their own constituents, like the older vote of people that are more Republican, and those rural voters, and you know, it's hurting their own constituents in the long run.
Am I the only one who, at least for like a split second, goes, "You guys are getting what you voted for"?
Yes, and you know,
But more
part of
so
me-
than my
I try
humanity
not to be-
returns.
exactly. I try not to say, you know what, just let it go through, and then they'll see how bad this thing is. I actually don't want that to happen to the. I don't want to say these people, to this constituency,
But to everyone, because it
to
affects everyone at
because
some point.
people can and will potentially die from this.
And
I
it
mean, I've
affects
seen real
everyone
cases.
at some point with their taxes and everything else.
Josh, can you scroll back up in the chat? I was about to read something and it disappeared, and I wanted to point out that, whoa, crazy stuff happening on the screen. No one can see it except us, but you'll have to just take our word for it. We'll get to it in a moment,
And
but a little bit further up there was a comment from Nicholas McMullen. I remember around 10 years ago when health care for everyone wasn't considered a necessity. This is progress. Terrible, painful, awkward progress. And to the basis area of his point is the fact that you're getting Republicans designing a bill for nationalized, to some extent, nationalized health care. And that's not something that ever would have happened. Now, they're doing it in the name of repealing Obamacare, and sure, 22 million people are going to be out of it, but they weren't interested in the government federally mandated government health care that 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I guess 9 years ago, so he's pretty much right. So it is progress that it's at least something both parties are talking about. The end result, you know, we've talked many times on this show about how there was a lot of work to be done on Obamacare. A lot of people feel that this is not the work that needed to be done to it. So somewhere in between the two is probably what the majority of people, look, not everyone's going to be happy with anything that you put out, but somewhere in between the two lies sort of a common ground that the most people will be happy with.
Hopefully that we can get to. And I know that a lot of viewers watch the show, and I've heard we've gotten a lot of flack that this panel is very one-sided, and I want to present a more bipartisan view if possible. I don't.
I'm just kidding. I think it's a good idea, but I just can't do it.
I will say that it's important for good
balance.
Yes, dialogue even, you know, for someone to present the other side. And I think that part of this I forget what the new name for ACH is in the
American
Senate. American
Health. Is this the same name, right?
I think the Senate renamed it something else.
Yeah, it has a different name. It's a different
We'll call it
abbreviation.
WealthCare for now. WealthCare. I think one thing that was pointed out that was beneficial was that premiums would go down. Apparently.
That's not true.
That's one of the things that I heard.
Thank you for trying to
I'm trying
defend
for
the other side.
Republican. And then another might have been that you get choice. I said this earlier.
Yeah. Well, actually, if
the government's not meddling with you, forcing you to do anything about your health care.
Okay. I think thank you for doing that, because I could do that. I mean, the only thing I heard today that not only do the very, very wealthy get a tax break, but people like me who are on the individual market may get a little bit of a break if you're younger. But I don't know
healthy.
if mid-30s counts as young. Probably not. So
you'll probably get a little break, but I'll probably
definitely
have to
not
spend
if you're
twice
on
as
the
much.
way older spectrum. They're
and that's the thing, they're just moving money around. So yes, some people might benefit, you're right, like maybe some of the young and healthy will benefit.
Only in the individual market.
But exactly, in the individual, and then it's not going to help overall for anyone else, especially in the older market. It can go up 4 to 5 times.
I'm trying, guys, and I will keep trying on every issue for you all.
Look, we appreciate
because
you
apparently I'm so I'm so liberal that I make Chelsea Galicia look like she runs the college Republicans. That's what someone wrote. I love
Somebody
that.
did? Wow.
Storage Yard Resident said, it's funny because I kept our quiz from the last time that Brooke was on. Storage Yard Resident said, this show needs to be named the Anti-Trump Report. That replacement woman That's Brooke. At Brooke Soliz TV is so far left she makes Chelsea look like she's a member of the Young Republicans Club.
I loved it.
Yeah. So thank you.
I'm going
And
to take that as a compliment.
By the way-
I'm also going to work to
Right.
be less biased as a journalist and, present the other side.
I don't think we don't journal, right?
we
don't
do,
journal.
but we definitely ist here, so we have to really focus on that.
doodle.
No, look, the idea of getting the other side out there is important to me, and
Yeah.
I talked many times on this show. If there were conservatives at AfterBuzz who were like, "Hey, how come there's no room for me?"
There's only like 2 secret ones that refuse to come on.
I don't know who the other one is, so I'll
I
have to
have a
ask
friend
you.
that we can bring on.
Well, yeah, and look,
But
we've
here's the other
One
thing.
friend.
Well, when we have tried to, when we were Trump versus Hillary, and we would have people call in, and they would say the most off the wall, nonsensical
Right, it was
things
so extreme.
that it just was
You
intolerable.
mean they were speaking like Trump?
wasn't there somebody that used to be on Trump versus Hillary? I haven't seen him in a while. I can't remember his
That's
name.
not who I was talking
No,
about.
no.
We're not
But
talking about our
somebody
friend
who-
Drexel.
Somebody who called in.
We had a few people on the phone,
and they
yeah.
would like go from one thing to the next, and without any sense and accountability for anything. So that's my
Reminds me of
issue
someone.
Well, we live in the age of no accountability, so
do,
that
that's true.
probably works very well for that kind of conversation. But oh well, I don't know actually. Our friend in the booth, Josh, wonders if we should have Michael Klaus on, who's over here at AfterBuzz TV, and I'm on the Tomorrow Show with him, and he's very religious, and I don't know that he's outright conservative, but it's not a bad point if. And I'm sure Michael's watching. If he's interested in coming on and sitting on the couch, obviously we'd be happy to have him. But it's very difficult to find somebody who's an outright conservative. And I'm always clear, I'm not even looking for a Trump fan, because Trump fans usually keep it to themselves, at least in this part of town. Just somebody who's a conservative.
Yeah.
You know, that's all we wanted.
Moderate conservative.
And I mean,
Rational moderate.
I'll even take someone who voted for a conservative once. You know, like, oh, there was that one time, you know, and I'm like, great,
hard
that
pressed to
counts.
find.
Yeah, it's not easy. So
They
there's
voted for Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, right.
I voted for Gary Coleman because I believed in the future of California. So another big topic, which sort of ties into the title of the episode and the song, is the Supreme Court gave a small win to President Trump. This was just yesterday, allowing a limited basis. The travel ban will take effect before it hears a lawsuit against the policy this fall. Chelsea, as our recovering attorney,
You knew he was
Yes.
gonna say
what
that.
exactly does this have to? What does this mean, basically?
So basically, a big chunk of the executive order is being allowed to be carried through. The 90-day postponement of allowing anybody from those 6 countries to come in. Same with refugees, although that's 120 days, unless those people have a bona fide connection to the U.S., like a family member or they're a student in an American university, they already have a job here, something of that nature that really has them already quite close to the United States. The interesting little unknown tidbit is, since it's supposed to last 90 days, the question has come up, well, maybe those 90 days are already up because he issued the executive order more than 90 days ago. So there are some people saying this is actually already done and gone, and others, of course, saying that the 90 days starts as of the ruling.
I would say it starts as of the ruling,
Yeah,
and
I
believe me,
think so.
all I know about the law is what I learned from 4 years of working on Law and Order SVU. So I believe that I might not have the best knowledge.
The law.
Yeah.
The other thing that is, I don't know if it's interesting because it's a little bit of a bummer. There is a chance that the Supreme Court will not ever pick this up again because
Right.
they're not going to talk about it,
heard this.
rule on it until October. And by that point, the 90 days will
It's
be
already
up.
over. Exactly.
And there will be no sort of like no harm, no foul, unless
Right, and
Because when I was
well,
going to ask.
I'll just say very quickly that it gets to be a victory for Trump because, see, look, the Supreme Court ruled in my favor, which isn't entirely true, but it's true enough that he's able to say it. And then by the time October rolls around, what does he care?
But I think he's going to renew the 90 days. I don't think he's just going to think
Right.
after these 90 days we're safe again. I think he's going to try and roll it over. So
Right, and that's what they were
I
saying.
think there's a good 35% chance that we'll find out from the Supreme Court.
That was an
what
interesting
they
number. What were you going to say?
35, I know.
What were you going to say, Brooke?
Actually, now I forget what I was going to say somewhat. So was this taken? So we had decisions that were had in the federal court on the state level, correct? Like federal courts and state, and then it went to the Supreme Court. I'm asking you. I'm understanding the process. Now, after the 90 days is up,
there were state claims started in the state,
Right.
but they were filed in federal court.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then when it went to the Supreme Court, at that point, after the 90 days are up, what needs to be done? Like another writ of certiorari to be reheard, or?
I mean, that's the thing, is if there's nobody that has standing, nobody that's injured by that, facing imminent injury or being injured, then nobody may have standing to continue the case.
Right, so it could just become moot.
Unless it's rolled over again or renewed, and then somebody who's being prohibited from coming in may have a claim.
Right.
Have
that
another
would
claim.
go forward.
I don't know. I kind of foresee that it could potentially just be done with.
It would die out, or they
die
would
out.
say,
Well,
After the 90
to
days.
Chelsea's point, he would have to renew it, and so he has to continue to be interested in this.
So what the Supreme Court did say is that Trump has a reasonable responsibility, desire, right to protect this country from people who may do us harm. The question, okay, does he have like a legitimate reason? Let's just say that is a legitimate reason, fine. But the second part of the analysis has to be that what the order is narrowly tailored to accomplish that mission. I think and it depends on the type of discrimination, that something has to be rationally related, so like at least somewhat having to do with the goal, versus intermediate scrutiny is like medium, close to it. But if this is discrimination based on religion, which is what the lower courts have said, that faces a really high bar. It's very difficult for the government to be able to defend discrimination against something like race, religion, because those are the strictest scrutinies. And so then the government has to prove that this order, this executive order, is the most narrowly tailored possible solution to accomplish the stated goal. That's the part where I don't think that it'll survive. If it ever did go to October.
Yeah.
Well, if you believe a lot of the rumors that were going on earlier this week, when the Supreme Court may or may not pick it back up in October, maybe Anthony Kennedy won't be there anymore. Maybe he'll retire.
No.
Well, look, there was a lot of talk about it, and there were people who were actually surprised. Let's talk a little bit about how he didn't retire, but then we have to at least, consider the hypothetical, what it would do to have that.
Do you want me to cry?
Where did this come from? What's your source?
Sources like, I don't know, that rag,
Twitter.
the Washington Post.
Oh,
I think
well, that
the
Well, there
article
was
was
so much
actually
chatter.
that he didn't retire.
was
Like, that
chatter,
was
yeah.
the story. Because there was so much chatter, they had to come out and say it didn't happen. But they're still addressing the fact that it didn't happen, and it talked about why people thought it might happen. Because he's 80, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I feel like he's got a good 16 more years in him. I mean, the way that some of these Supreme Court justices go. But, and I'll start again with Chelsea. Look how lucky you are being a recovering attorney. Your thoughts about why he won't retire and what it would mean, other than you crying, if he did.
Okay, so he was appointed by Reagan, right? So he was, a conservative judge, but he's been the swing vote. So sometimes he goes with the conservative justices, other times with the liberals. So in a sense, you could say that Justice Kennedy is the deciding vote on virtually all the cases. You could say he's the most important of all the justices. So if he were to go, it would be like earth-shattering for the Supreme Court. And I would have to do a lot of praying that another Anthony Kennedy could be
and see, that's the real
replacing
question
him.
is, hypothetically, if Hillary Clinton was president right now and he retired right now, who's to say that she would appoint a swing justice and not be like, well, good, I can get some hardcore lefty in there, so
Well,
I
I mean,
think that you're going to run into that problem, whoever replaces him, whenever that is.
I would say, but when you were talking about like Merrick Garland, he was very much a moderate. He wasn't a liberal or a conservative. He was sort of Obama's first pick was sort of in the middle of that, and I think it's the same thing. I think with the way the country's so divided, that if Hillary Clinton were president, that she couldn't just put an extreme left liberal judge.
They
up
wouldn't
there.
get approved.
Right.
Okay.
I think it'd be a lot more difficult, especially with the House and Senate being so split, the Senate being so divided. So I think it's a little way around it where it's now that Mitch McConnell's done the nuclear option and they just roll out a very extreme conservative person out there, then it does have a better chance of going through this time because it's already been done now.
I need to, if it's okay, to respond to Storage Yard resident.
Hey, look, there he is.
That is true, and then there's an exception.
Yeah.
Except
Well,
on the basis
explain his
of-
point.
So he's saying, quote, the U.S. code allows, and I'm not sure what he means by the code, but okay, allows Trump to make these prohibitions on foreigners. Yes, but then there's always exceptions, and among the exceptions is basis of religion and others.
Race. Yeah.
Well,
Basic
first of all, I'm glad
gender.
Storage Yard resident is there in the chat.
Yes,
Sometimes
hi.
I worry when
He's
he's not
here.
there. Yeah, and I know, and that really crazy.
I'm giving you both sides now, Storage Yard resident.
Brooke's gonna
I
try
think
and win you
it's
over.
all my law school classes. I'm trying to argue both points now.
I know she's a recovering attorney, and you're an aspiring one.
Yes,
and
I'm
we had
working on
a
it.
we had a question after last week's show. Scott knows this. It was on the YouTube page, and it was asking. No, it was asking if the guys were lawyers too.
well, thank you,
And,
but
we're like, well, thanks.
not
but
that smart.
No. You know, I talked just moments ago about the law knowledge that I got from Moderator SVU, but I also got some from Judge Judy. So I feel, and look, as a kid, I
Judge
saw
Wapner.
I saw a lot of Judge Wapner as a kid. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But I really learned more from Rusty the Bailiff. But anyway, so it's good if we have you both here. There's at least
Yes.
more legal standing to
Cred.
go on.
Don't have any
smarter.
expectations of me, but okay.
Well, actually, pretty soon she's going to be the expert because it has now been 10 years since I was in law school, and after taking the bar, I never again touched many of these issues.
you try
So-
to just get it out of your brain, and I'm in the thick of it every single day. But
And
good
yay
for
you. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Very excited for you.
So we alluded to it in the beginning, and I know Chelsea wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about Ivanka Trump telling Fox and Friends that she tried to stay out of politics. Let's start with Scott. Your thoughts when you heard that? Because obviously,
I laughed, basically.
I would say
I
she's
don't
done.
back alive.
She's done a fairly good job. Out of you know, I don't think that she's really been involved in too many things. It doesn't seem like there's been any business gains from her father being president. Not
Clearly
on any
not.
trips to Japan
No,
or
of course
anything.
not.
I think
You're
she.
making me scrunch my eyebrows, and that's not going to be good
that's-
for my
yeah.
forehead.
that's-
you're the one
No
girl in
wrinkling.
LA who can.
That's not covered under Trump care if you get any
Right.
wrinkles on your forehead, so you should be careful. Yeah, so just look surprised. So yeah, Scott, is Ivanka Trump doing a good job staying out of politics?
She's doing a great job. If you're watching Fox News, then sure.
It's interesting how Fox and Friends, and it's not the other shows on Fox. It's really only Fox and
Right.
Friends, and they pretty much the Trump family. Well, you know, basically not Melania. I don't know that she's doing a lot of interviews right now, but they all kind of go on there, and I mean, President Trump.
Have
It's like he has a
meltdowns.
regular spot on Fox and Friends, but this seems like the kind of statement you can make on Fox and Friends.
Of course.
Because nobody's
No
going
one's
to
gonna
say
hold you to it.
Nobody's going to give some examples.
Nobody's going to be like, so what are you doing with an
Right.
office in the White House?
Exactly. Like,
And
I
an
mean-
advisor to
She's
your father.
basically his chief advisor.
Right. So, there's a comment from Danny H saying that for Ivanka, it's not politics, it's business. But does she has to run business from the White House? I mean, I guess conceivably.
But see, that's the
I
way of
thought
being
she
able to flip things
relinquished her
around.
role doing any business at all whatsoever.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, I mean, look, I guess that's a lot of what we hear, but
But the reason that I wanted to talk about it was because Ivanka Trump is not the first one to say, oh no, I don't talk about politics, as though it is something beneath you, that it is something messy and ugly and only, those kinds of people
Only
who
the
like to
swamp
argue and
and
yeah,
Washington
deal with
deal with
politics.
that.
And she's just too, clean and above politics. And I think that is the reason why we're in the situation that we are right now, because too many people said politics is for other people. It's not for me. We've been told that it's rude, that it's unkind to talk about politics with people. It's part of my motivation for doing the show, so that it is a more easy conversation to voice your opinion, no matter if it's, crazy one direction or the other. But that we can normalize talking about politics, and that there's no shame about it, and actually that it's not cool to be like, oh, I'm not political at all. I don't have a ton of respect and compassion for people who are like, I just, I'm going to stay out of it, because it affects them, it affects everyone,
course.
and this democracy will not work if we have too many people who are too cool for
well,
politics.
that's why it's already not working in a lot of ways.
I agree with your point, but what I will say as the caveat is that there are just times where I'm like, can I just not right now? You know, sometimes I need
understand
to,
that.
different.
I need to
That's
take a step
different.
back.
That's different, though.
But
Taking
in
some
general,
time.
the people who are like, no, I don't
I
want to
often
talk
find
about
that
it.
those people who don't want to talk about politics, I'm not trying to make a blanket general statement about everyone, but they're just not well versed in what's going on.
What do you think of that statement, Storage Yard resident? Do you like it more or less?
And the other thing is that when they say I don't want to talk about politics, what they're saying is I actually don't want to listen, because people love to talk about themselves and their own beliefs. They wouldn't mind it if they all just got to say whatever they thought.
They don't want a dialogue.
The
yeah.
part
Right.
about having to hear another side and take it on, they just don't want the energy of having to defend against it, and that's the problem. If you know,
And what a
listen and try it on.
privilege to not have to talk about politics if it doesn't affect you in any major
that's
way.
what I was going to say. There's also that lazy side of it where people don't want to be bothered with it and they don't care, and that's why you get a lot of times where I think a lot of times with these Republicans, with going back to the healthcare bill, it's basically like, well, nobody will care by the time next year, and they'll vote us in again because they're just going to vote for the R next to the name. They're not going to know exactly what these people are doing or who's influencing them money-wise and lobbying them. And I think that's part of the issue, too, is that people just are lazy and don't want to be informed and just don't care.
And when you think about people like Rand Paul, who would like to not have government in his life as much, that's also quite a privilege, because when you're not fighting for your life, or you don't have this disease where you just absolutely can't afford to pay for all of your needs,
and you have good money.
you need help,
You make good money.
and you are paying taxes, and you would like to have some assistance. I mean, what privilege to not have to talk about politics, to not need to
to
even
exempt themselves
to exempt
from the plan.
Well, and that's exactly what I said,
Oh,
too.
that's a whole other-
I was said that if a couple Republicans were to say, I'm going to sign on to this bill, and we actually get to follow their report.
And my kids are going to be
and they're
going
gonna
to
be on. My family's going to be on this.
My kids
'cause
are going to
that's
be
how much I
on this
believe in it.
plan, no matter what happens.
Right.
If the laws get better for people, my kids are going to be stuck with this plan for life.
Right.
That's how much I want the.
That's what I'm saying. That's how much I
Republican
believe in it.
side.
And then I would have more.
Take it a step
trust in
further,
it.
and you know, if some of these Republican, let's just say in general, the people, although none of the Democrats are going to vote for it, so in this case, it is all the Republicans. If they're like, oh, and I'm going to put my elderly parents on it too, because that's, you know, putting your kids on it is one thing,
Right.
but it's like, oh yeah, you know, my family who unfortunately is
They're gonna
filled
have
with
to pay more.
pre-existing conditions, they're going to be on it too.
But those are irresponsible people of not taking care of their health. What are you talking about? Pre-existing conditions. That's what they feel.
Some would say that. Some would say, Brooke.
Babies who are born.
Brooke, some would say that what you had for dinner was a pre-existing condition. What were you going to say, Chelsea?
Why are we keep bringing this up? Why are you talking about old stuff?
What I was going to say is
Like an hour ago.
what the other side often argues is, well, if you want health coverage, go get a job. Go get a job. Okay, yes, we all work in some capacity. I don't want to have a job working for someone
Right.
else. I want to work for myself.
Right.
That should be my American freedom and dream to pursue
Right.
that if I want to. So to say, oh, you should just get a job, that's one reason why I think that claim has no credibility.
Well,
And the other,
and we should have a whole other discussion about how employer-tied healthcare was just a ridiculous
disaster
thing anyways
from
to
the
begin
beginning.
with.
Yeah. And the other part is that if you just sit back for a second and think about it, what you are saying is that you are only worthy to live life if you have a job. You are worthless. You should not expect to be here, to be alive, unless you're making money and contributing to this economy and paying taxes.
By the way, that's working under the assumption that there are plenty of jobs to go around and that everybody can get them. And, you know,
And that everyone
Trump
can
can
get
say
them
what he
and afford
wants.
them.
Whatever the White House wants to say about where unemployment's at, no one's saying it's zero, you know? So there
Well-
are people, it's like, why don't you get a job? Great, where are these jobs that you were supposed to
Well,
create?
And
that's
I
what
went
they-
to public school and I don't
Right.
know jack schnackies, so I can't get a job. You know, I have no skills and, you know, I
Right.
can't pay for
Or
college.
you don't have the connections to be able to
Exactly. I
get the
was
job
going to
that's
say
going to be
you
able
lost
to pay.
the birth lottery and you're a
Right.
baby who has leukemia. What are you going to tell that baby? You were
get a
irresponsible.
job.
Go
Health
get a
issues.
job. I'm sorry that
Yeah, I mean,
your
if-
mother was
if-
on the wrong side of history.
If that baby's cute
This
enough, it
unlevel
can be a
playing field.
Gerber baby, and it can go ahead and
I mean-
have
I
a
mean,
healthcare
we are in
plan from
LA,
that.
so-
Yeah, get an agent.
that baby to work.
But that storage yard resident was talking about the the elderly parents being on Medicare,
That's a
but they
good
were
point.
talking about but they were talking about cutting Medicare.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
and they were saying that, and that was the whole thing that Kellyanne Conway was saying about, you should go get a job if you're concerned about your cuts to Medicare. Well, yeah, that doesn't even make any sense because these are people that are usually at retirement age. So you're going to tell an 80-year-old go out and get
Get
a
a
job
job.
to cover
Pull
the difference
yourself up by
between
your
your
bootstraps,
Medicare.
Granny.
I mean, that's again, it's unnecessarily cruel.
It makes
and
no
rude.
sense.
It makes no
well,
sense.
At a policy level, and it makes no sense on a humanity level. And I think we don't talk about the humanity level enough.
One of the things I want to make sure we talk about before we run out of time, as we always do, over the weekend, a number of news outlets pointed out that CNN managed to publish a story about President Trump's ties to Russia, which was very quickly retracted. There were a lot of apologies. It was a bad weekend for CNN's investigations editor, Lex Harris, because he traveled to, of all things, a journalism conference in Phoenix. And while he was gone, they posted something that didn't meet their standards, and he is now among 3 people who have resigned. So, what does this do when you publish one fake story, admitted fake story that you retract about Russia? Well, that kind of makes it that makes it very easy to say that the Russia story is fake.
It's completely
all along,
into
like
hands.
I have been telling you at Real Donald Trump. So that was great for him. So whatever they wanted to do with their... And where does CNN get off posting a story that they haven't...
It didn't meet editorial standards.
It wasn't that it was
Sure.
completely fake. They had one anonymous source, and usually you have 2 as a minimum, and you usually make sure that you go through the vetting process. There's certain guidelines that you do before that. And they did not do that because, of course, they're rushing the story out, and they had one source that, of course, wasn't a verifiable, truthful source.
And then...
This is all
So,
Trump needed.
Right, and I was going to say, but it wasn't a completely fake story. It wasn't like they just made up a story
Right.
and put it out there. They had done this investigation. They had, admittedly rushed it through and had only gotten through one source and not verified it with a second source or multiple sources. And that's the problem that you have when you have these anonymous sources, and there is a big problem with that. And we mentioned this on here a couple of months ago, actually, is the whole point about the media needs to just take a collective breath, because they do have a very important job to do. But when you have a president actively fighting them, their pressure is like, let's get them back, let's get this stuff out here. And I think a lot of times you're doing it without making sure you're going through the proper channels because you want to get it out. And that's the hyper fast social media world now, where something's right away and instantaneous, unlike in the past, like 20, 30 years ago, when you had to wait for the nightly news and then you had to wait the next day for the newspaper to come out. It's that kind of
You
stuff.
had a little bit more time, and
now it's like everyone's got to be the first to get the story out, and they're going like, okay, great, we have an anonymous source, it's close enough, let's get it out there.
being first is much more important than
being
right.
right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do have to say, listen, Trump needs an enemy. And the media is the enemy right now. They can no longer bash the Democrats, really, or bash Obama and say he's doing all these things wrong.
He
'cause
does
he's
go
no
on
lo-
too many vacations.
He's no longer there to bash. So who else are we going to bash? It's the media. And also, this is his way of, we know what a dictator or authoritarian
Right.
does. You discredit the media, because if you're going to put out lies, you need to discredit the media, because the media can never verify or report anything that's true. So it's just his way of following
But
the
of
dictatorship
course,
handbook.
and he took everyone else out, but of course didn't mention Fox on his tweets.
Obviously.
Of course.
Look, he wants to keep that weekly booking on
Right.
Fox and Friends
Open.
He doesn't want them to take that away. Sort of a secondary story to that is something that I'm sure that people on this panel will roll their eyes when I mention, but the investigative journalist, some people call him a documentary filmmaker, other people call him ambush artist, James O'Keefe, who has released a number of videos over the years, had a video of someone from CNN saying, well, the Russia thing is bullshit and we're just doing it for ratings. And that's something that you probably should, if it's true, and I think just one person thinks that. I actually don't think everyone at CNN thinks that. But saying that to someone that you clearly don't know well enough to maybe
Right.
be making those statements, and that's what I always find hard to believe, is the people that get caught in any of these things, and it doesn't even have to be politically
Right.
based. It's just like, who is this person that you're, like when it's the local news investigates an auto body shop who's ripping
Yeah.
people off. It's like, you went right to the blatant thing that makes you look really bad. Like, you didn't, well, we might have some other thing. No, just you go right to it, and you go like, well, yeah, the Russia thing is bullshit. And what does this do? It's the same thing I'm talking about. It just sort of feeds that narrative that everything about Russia is bullshit, including the fact that Russia exists and that Putin is president.
Right.
I think they're just like, look, none of it's happening.
Yeah.
None of it's true.
You get one little bit, one little nugget, and then it's all phony.
Right.
It's all fake. What are they calling it? A big nothing burger? I heard a lot of Republicans.
There's a
say.
lot of. I've heard a lot of.
Have you heard that?
There's a montage of Nothing Burger, which I think was
But
coined
come on,
on
guys.
Fox and Friends.
We know. You guys might say we're conspiracy theorists, or I am, but we know that there are all of these ties, whether some of them are legal or illegal or not, between Trump and Russia. We know that.
Well, there's
we will
specifically-
follow the money because, and
Right.
some of it might be implicating him, implicative of him.
Implicating him?
Yeah, implicating
Yeah.
him, and some of it might not. But there are clear ties.
Oh, absolutely.
That's not a nothing burger.
No.
It's there. It's
I was going to say
It's-
follow the rubles, but I don't even know. Do they still use rubles, or do they have a different form
Is
of
that a
currency?
Russian thing, rubles?
I mean, it was,
Yeah.
during the Cold War. So before we started, Brooke had on her tinfoil hat, and she was looking at
was,
some.
like,
But it's
channeling.
interesting. Just sort of talk about the big Paul Manafort thing that you told
Yes.
us beforehand, and of course where you heard that, because that's very important.
Clearly,
was it,
Rachel Maddow.
Was it from Infowars?
Not from
Can we
Infowars.
make it a rule
Speaking
that
of-
we never say Alex Jones or
my
Infowars?
Okay, you just said both of them, so that's not my
First and
fault.
last
I
time,
just
though.
said Infowars.
I mean, no.
Well, I was talking to
her dinner is
I'll
going to
call him
come
AJ.
through me if we agree.
What's with
I would
my
like to see
dinner?
that. See, this is why you never tell us anything right before.
know,
But let's talk. Before we run out of time, let's talk
yes,
about Paul Manafort.
very quickly, Paul
and not
Manafort.
what he had for dinner.
Paul Manafort today registered as a foreign agent retroactively because he did have dealings with Ukraine 2012 to 2014. Now, one might wonder, why would he do that right now?
Well, and my first question was, wait, you can do that? You can do it
Retroactively, I know.
And Chelsea
And
said,
I mean, Flynn did also.
You're not supposed to.
you're not supposed to do
No,
that.
of course not.
So what it begs the question: why does Paul feel like he needs to make
Right.
sure he's doing everything
he said
right?
he said he was going to, and then it's just taken
Yeah,
months
it's
for him
taken
to
so
get
much
around
time.
to it.
But I think we know the answer,
It's-
that Bob Mueller is dotting his I's and crossing his T's. That's
Or
the
you
expression.
can dot your T's and cross your I's too. There's no
Right.
problem
Yeah.
with that. We would know what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
I'm gonna have to mention it. Storage Yard resident says,
please,
"I
you
like
don't have-
Alex Jones and Infowars."
Oh.
You said don't say both of them, but it's a quote from Storage Yard resident. And
I want to know what you like about him. Please tell
about
us.
Storage Yard resident?
no,
I was gonna say he's been with us from our
Storage Yard
first
I
show.
want to know what Storage
He's like-
Yard resident, why he likes Alex Jones.
Okay, here, and this will make Chelsea very angry. What I'll say is that he's not afraid to say what he believes. Now, what he
he's
believes is
also-
crazy.
He doesn't believe that. He said in court he doesn't believe what he says. He's putting
Oh, because
on
that's a
performance.
character.
Yes.
But that's just what happens when you have a
And he's not afraid to record you without
Right.
your knowing.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think that's the most times that people have heard Megyn Kelly in the last few months is when she was secretly recorded by Alex Jones saying, "We're not going to do a hatchet job on you," before she did it. If I said his name too many times, Chelsea, you look
I
like
know,
you're-
she's
know,
getting
it's
so
like-
there's like
annoyed.
steam
You
coming
say
out
it like
of
3
yours.
times in a row, then.
And our Scott Brown says, "And Oscar the Grouch loves trash." That's not nice. Storage Yard resident works in a storage yard. One thing I want to get to is, and I always say Regla Vicor's name wrong, but wanted to point out that Sarah Huckabee Sanders had a whole thing about fake news today. And how come the cameras can be in there when she's talking, but not when Sean Spicer? I know we talked last week
SNL.
because he got. I guess it's really
Spicy.
SNL. Yeah, Spicy just doesn't want to be on it.
Poor Spicy.
Yeah.
He's getting so scared. He's no longer in the bushes. He's now just like in the back corridor.
That's why he doesn't want to be on camera, so he's not
So,
seen.
but she really said that this proves. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that this instance, the CNN retraction, proves that this is fake news. And I meant to write it down, but there was actually someone there. I think it was from the Associated Press who called her out. And
Oh,
was like-
yeah.
and there's a great exchange, and we don't have
Yeah.
time to
Yeah, it was
play
really-
it because I saw it like right before I came over here.
saw it.
But take a look at it and see that there are at least, and maybe people are less intimidated by her than Spicy, but they're able to point out that, she's just saying the company line, which is like, see, this proves fake news, and everybody has their fake news. And the reporter, whose name I wish I could remember, doesn't say this isn't a direct quote, but it's like, but you guys manufacture fake news. So, and it's just like our job is to weed through the fake news from everywhere. And I don't know. We try to not have fake
half
news
of
on here,
Trump's
by the way.
tweets
Yeah,
there are
exactly.
tapes. There aren't tapes.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
Please.
being exactly.
Well, that's more
the fake
about
news.
that's like P.T. Barnum stuff. That's like I don't know. There might be tapes. Stay tuned.
And when there are, I'll tell you.
I'll tell you on Fox and Friends tomorrow at 6:45.
And Obama, the wiretapping, and as I said, the birther movement. All these things, lies upon lies upon lies, just to discredit the media. And I admit, and I get it, the media should not have, and that's what we've said a couple months ago, they should not be rushing stories out. They need to make sure they're vetted properly. They need to have multiple sources. And to Brooke's point, there's definitely something there with Russia. To where it goes and what the degree is, there's definitely something there. You don't have a special prosecutor. You don't have everybody lawyering up for nothing. And again, if he was completely innocent, or his administration was completely innocent, then he would be very forthcoming and open and say, "Here we go, open book, nothing to hide."
None
This
of
would
the
have been
people.
done with a long time
And that's
ago
exactly what I
if
said
there
about the
was
tax returns and everything. The fact he doesn't show that, it means he has something to hide.
But don't we know that Donald Trump has already acknowledged that Russia is a thing when he sent that, tweeted about Obama knew and didn't do anything.
Well, that's the thing. Then he
about
reversed
Russia
it because I was trying to project it back on Obama.
He just acknowledged that Russia meddled with the elections.
and got mad at Obama.
And they got mad for not doing more.
So
doing
he
anything.
retracted that?
No, I'm saying from his earlier thing of being like, oh, there's nothing, no Russia stuff, no collusion, no anything else, and they didn't affect the elections, then trying to blame Obama for it and be like, why didn't you come out and do this? So basically he was admitting that there was Russia meddling in the election, because now he's basically saying, why didn't
Same
Obama
way
do
he
more?
admitted that he was being investigated.
Right.
But that was
then,
satire.
Exactly.
Well, to the point that we were making, and we do have to wrap up in a moment, but the idea that if there is nothing to do with Russia, then no one would have resigned. Jeff Sessions wouldn't have recused himself from it. If there was nothing there,
He wouldn't have
if it
fired
was
James
a
Comey.
nothing burger,
Flynn
then everybody
wouldn't
would
have
still be there.
Fired,
Flynn is still trying to make a deal, my
Right.
friend, so Flynn's got something to hide.
Trump wouldn't have fired Comey. None of this stuff would have happened.
Maybe Flynn has tapes. That's what he should say.
I mean, I think Flynn's definitely.
By the way,
He's trying to tell Trump something. You're either gonna help me out, you're gonna pardon me, or I'm still working on making this deal.
Yeah, and there might be tapes.
That's
what
the lettuce
there
in
are,
my
of
finger.
course, always tapes of, I'm using air quotes, is the Trump Report, which you can find on Twitter at Trump Report ABTV. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, please make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. But the commenting is very important. It just takes a minute. Just tell us how much you love all of us, or you can even say how much you dislike us. That's fine.
And we ignore the disrespectful stuff.
We don't mind.
No,
I
look,
don't
if
mind
they
the
want to
negative
post the
comments.
disrespectful stuff, it actually helps. It helps bump us up. So if you want to give us no stars, somebody else will give us 5 stars. But anyway,
like
we want
Oscar
you to do
Wilde
that.
says.
What we want to make sure everybody knows, though, is we are off next Tuesday because, despite what some people in the chat might say, we all love America, so we want to celebrate our Independence Day. Also, no one will be working at AfterBuzz that day, but we also love America. That's the important part. So we will be back live 2 Tuesdays from now, July 11th, 7 Pacific. And as I said, be sure to follow us at Trump Report ABTV. So thank you for Scott Moore at SMan80. Chelsea Galicia at Chelsea Galicia, Brooke Soliz at Brooke Soliz TV. I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ, and we will see you not next week, but next time on the Trump Report.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.